You are tuned in to a Fireside chat with Zany Mystic. Join us now on another exciting metaphysical journey. Relax, tune in, drop out, and take a seat by the fire as we explore new realms and possibilities. This is Magenta Pixie. You can find me at magentapixie.weebly.com. But now, here is Zany Mystic and guest. Enjoy the show.
Greetings, Earth people, and welcome to a Fireside Chat with Zany Mystic. I'm your host, Lance White. Tonight, my guest is Nick Redfern. Originally from England, Nick lives in Arlington, Texas. He is a full-time author and journalist specializing in a wide range of unsolved mysteries, including UFOs, alien contact, Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, government conspiracies, and paranormal phenomena. He writes regularly for UFO Magazine, Fortean Times, Paranormal Magazine, and Fate. His previous books include Memoirs of a Monster Hunter, Strange Secrets, A Covert Agenda, and There's Something in the Woods. Among his many exploits, Redfern has investigated reports of aliens in Mexico, lake monsters in Scotland, vampires in Puerto Rico, werewolves in England, and crashed UFOs in the United States. We'll be discussing all of those things and his new book, which is now out, Contactees, A History of Alien-Human Interaction, which is available at Amazon.com. So let's welcome Nick to the show now. Hi, Nick. How are you?
Hey, Lance. I'm doing good, thanks. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You know, I really thoroughly enjoyed your book.
Oh, thanks.
I was born in 1950, and my parents were kind of a little bit on the bohemian, slightly avant-garde side. And I vaguely remember as a child that they used to talk about some of these people that you mentioned in the beginning of the book. And, you know, I was totally ignorant of the very beginnings of the whole UFO movement and how famous some of these people became. It's really a fascinating story, and it filled in a lot of blanks for me. And then I really enjoyed the fact that you moved on into various kinds of other forms of encounter, which we can get into too. So it was quite a wonderful read, and it's entertaining and some moments of humor and well written.
Oh, thanks a lot.
You're welcome. So how did you begin to? You've done a lot of research. How did you begin to start out?
You mean with the book?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, basically, what it was, you know, I do a lot of conferences and lectures, and often, you know, in question and answer sessions, you know, the subject just gets into various areas of the whole UFO subject. And one of the things that I found over the last couple of years, particularly, is that where you have a lot of people who are perhaps newer to the subject, you know, they're fully aware of things like Area 51 and alien abductions, but through no fault of their own, you know, the early years of the whole UFO subject and the UFO movement really, to a lot of people new to the subject, aren't that well known. And one of the reasons is because a lot of the early books and magazines on the subject, you know, they're just so hard to come by today.
Yeah.
Or they're very expensive in some cases. And so, you know, unless you sort of, you know, you're prepared to spend $50 here and $60 there on somebody's book, you know, it can be difficult. So I thought, one of the reasons I thought was, well, why not go back and address these early cases of alien contact again?
Yeah.
Present it for a new audience, but don't just sort of go back and just retell the stories. Try and dig into the evidence and try and come to some conclusions as to what was going on. And so that was basically the idea behind it, was to, you know, just, I guess, retrospectively look back at the contactees and see what we could learn from the cases and try and put new slants on it and find new evidence.
Well, they were just fascinating stories, and, you know, some of them were just riveting, especially the man in the tavern that had the fizzy drink.
Orfeo Angelucci.
Yes, oh my goodness. And then the other one that met the woman who was very seductive. What's one of your favorite stories of these people that...
Well, I mean, it's difficult to kind of pinpoint it to one, I suppose. I mean, one of the things I found is that, the contactees are sort of definitive characters. They're all sort of memorable people. They would kind of stand out in a crowd anyway.
Yeah.
But I think, Orfeo Angelucci, Truman Bethurum, some of their stories, because they're so controversial and memorable. But equally, you think, well, could there actually be a grain of truth there as well, or several grains of truth. So, I think in terms of what you can learn from the subjects, arguably the whole movement is as entertaining as it is intriguing and informative, I suppose.
Well, what I find funny is that it seems that there's so many different UFO communities out there, and they've all got their own slant, and they don't seem to allow too much open-mindedness to the other aspects, and that puzzles me because this is a whole area of investigation that really kind of requires an open mind.
Yeah, I mean, you do unfortunately find that not just in the UFO subject, but in all areas of investigating the unexplained. It's like with UFOs that you have the people who think UFOs are alien, then you have people who take more like an esoteric view that it's some sort of interdimensional thing. Other people, look at other ideas and scenarios, and you often find that it creates, I suppose, factions where, he's the person who believes that, she's the person who believes this, and, sometimes they don't mix, with each other's camps, etc.
Yeah.
And it does, instead of having an open mind, I don't think it's done deliberately, but sometimes you do find that people follow one belief system and stick to that belief system, even, in evidence, when there's evidence suggesting that we should be looking into other areas as well. It does become sort of very sort of polarized into different areas.
Yeah, and, you make such an interesting point towards the end that we might need to completely rethink what is behind these people who are visiting. For instance, in the beginning, I guess visitors used to just get out of the saucers and start talking to people, and in some cases there would be like two lights that would come close to the car, and then a televisor screen with a beautiful man and a woman speaking to them, and I mean, this is just such fantastic stuff. I just love it. You suggest that maybe there's something we're not really seeing what's behind the curtain.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you look at the contactees, so people who aren't necessarily familiar with the contactee movement, I'm sure everybody today has heard of the so-called alien abductees, where people report being taken on spacecraft and subjected to, like, distressing medical experimentation by these little small aliens that have become known as the Greys.
Well, yeah, Whitley Strieber is one of the biggest proponents of that.
Yeah, they're sort of 3 to 4 foot tall, large heads, black eyes, etc. Now, everybody, even little kids, can recognize that sort of image of what an alien's supposed to look like. But if you go back to the early 50s, late 40s, nobody was talking about abductees. It was all contactees. And the big difference between today's abductees and the contactees of 40, 50, 60 years ago is that they were claiming that primarily the situation was usually the same. They would feel compelled. Certain people who had no actual prior interest in UFOs would suddenly feel compelled to sort of jump in their cars and drive out to a remote location, not even really knowing why. And then suddenly this, classic flying saucer would loom into view, would land, and very human-looking aliens would allegedly come off the craft with heads of long blonde hair and dressed in silver suits, and they would start talking about how we should disarm our nuclear weapons and everybody should live in peace and harmony. And it was almost, as I describe in the book, like a cosmic hippie-type experience. And one of the things, that's because the stories were so controversial, one of the things that happened was that it sort of polarized people in ufology at the time into two camps. There were those who interpreted the stories literally, that these contactees actually met long-haired aliens from this planet or that star system or wherever. Or, on the other hand, you had people who were saying, no, this is absolute nonsense, these people are just liars and fantasists. But, as I point out in the book, I think there's some strong evidence that there was a genuine alien intelligence at work, alien being, definitively non-human, where I think there's a good possibility that the contactees were almost rendered into like an altered state where their minds were played with, and some sort of alien phenomenon may have manifested in a way that looked to them like long-haired, human-looking aliens. But it may have been almost like a Matrix-style hologram, or a very extensive mind manipulation. And what was actually going on isn't what they were literally seeing, but it was manifesting in a way that was sort of understandable for the people. If you imagine there's a really sort of highly advanced alien intelligence millions of years in front of us, trying to contact and speak with us would be like us trying to talk to an ant. But if you can kind of present yourself in a fashion and an appearance, even if it's a mirage or a hallucination, or the mind's played with, they can still get that message across, and we understand it. So I think that was going on to a large extent, that people's minds were being played with, but there was something trying to interact and speak with them.
Well, I had Jim Sparks on the show once, and he is a lifelong abductee, and so whatever his experiences that he was fighting them and resisting them, and this went on for years and years, and he had almost total recall of all of the experiences, and it ended up that they were all in front of visor screens or telescreens and being shown, the Earth in its pristine form and what the Earth looked like now and where it was headed. And so it does seem that there's some kind of ecological message that they're trying to get across, in addition to having our children. I've talked to other people who have been on ships and seen, rows and rows of babies in these kind of enclosed clear glass kind of pods. I wouldn't call them pod people; they were babies. But what was so remarkable for her, she was being shown, what they were doing with her fluids, was that they weren't crying and they weren't making any noise and they weren't smiling or laughing or anything. They were just still. And it was kind of she remembers that was kind of a spooky moment, to think that maybe there are Earth alien children being, hatched all over the place, and it's also quite possible that some forms of ancient civilizations are here underground as well, that were here before us.
Yeah, there's lots of theories like that. The idea that these beings aren't coming from point A to point B every day, that they actually have bases or some sort of installations on the Earth itself, which would actually make more sense. Given a large number of sightings, it would make more sense if they have sort of like a staging post here rather than having to keep coming back and forth, etc.
Absolutely. Well, I was quite shocked. I've always been looking out at, pictures of fuzzy objects that are supposed to be, we caught a UFO and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden I stumbled across one site after another that was, and a program on, I think it was the History Channel, that showed ships going into the water. And there's a whole movement of that. I had never even I'd never even thought of that there might be underground bases that they just zipped underneath the water, and that would be a very easy thing to do. So, that's quite possible.
Yeah, you look at the Earth. There's parts of the Earth in the oceans where it's really deep that even our best submarines just cannot reach even now. And they would be the ideal places to hide out. And, we're scanning the skies with radar, etc., and they're sort of doing their thing below us. So.
Yes, absolutely. Now, we can't have a show without talking about this part of it. So many people believe or are curious about the theoretical contracts that the certain groups made with various governments, our own included. And I believe it was during Eisenhower's watch that he actually went to a meeting and agreed to allow certain